This is an all-important conversation with a man who has occupied various positions in various levels of national development, in various sectors as well. But most importantly, his contribution to the development of the education sector in this country has been highlighted in various fronts. I'm talking about no other than Emeritus Professor Addae Mensah, a former Vice-Chancellor of the Premier University of Ghana, Legon, but now enjoying his retirement and not resting because he has a lot of work to do. Prof, I thank you so much for making the time to talk to us. How are you doing? It's been so long. How are you coping in this COVID period?
Oh, like anybody else. You just get up, you try and take all the precautions that have been outlined and hope for the best, that you don't catch it, that's all.
Well, many people know you for what you have done, your achievements, but beyond what we know, who is Addae Mensah?
Well, my life started almost 10th January 1942. I was born at Akim Oda. My father was a schoolmaster at Akim Swedru Methodist School. And my mother was a domestic science teacher. We were at Akim Swedru when I was born at Akim Down Hospital. From May 1949, when my mother died, we moved to Axim with my father, ostensibly for him to go and seek medical help. And for 5 months, I was out of school with my 2 other elder brothers. I was the youngest. We were 3 boys, and I was the youngest. So for 5 months, I was out of school. So my grandmother, my mother's mother, who was at Takwa, got rather disturbed and came and took me and the one that I immediately followed, who is a retired professor of surgery of KNUST now. He came and took us to Takwa. And when I got to Takwa, there was no place in the Methodist school for both of us. But in my case, I was admitted to class 3 without my name being in the register. So I had no desk. I used to sit on the floor and write on a stool. Anytime somebody absented himself or herself from school, then I will perch myself on the person's, After 1 month, having been out of school for 5 months, we did the test and I came 4th. So my name was put in the register for Standard 1. The then Member of Parliament for the Wasa South constituency, which is now Takwan Swahim constituency, was E.K. Datsun. And E.K. Datsun had stayed with my father to attend school until he finished school. He was brought up by my father. So he took special interest in us when my father died. So because he was a member of parliament, he made me join the CPP Youth League. And together with his own son, our role was anytime Nkrumah visited Takwa or those areas, we would go onto the platform and recite poems for Nkrumah before he speaks. So that's when I started getting myself involved in national affairs.
I know many people don't know you beyond the very elaborate things that you did in the education sector, having been the Vice-Chancellor of the Premier University of Ghana. But I know that you were the youngest board chair of the Voter Authority. Want to let us into those other things?
I'm on record as the youngest ever chairman of Voter Authority at the age of 37. I started the National Petroleum Authority when Kufuor started that organization to look at the downstream sector of the Petroleum Authority. In 1972, at the age of 30, I became a member of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. In fact, my first paid job was actually in broadcasting, in the music department. My boss was Mike Egan. My direct boss was Mike Egan. I was still then in secondary school. You know, I have 4 children. The eldest is the MD of Data Bank, who is also a sports commentator. If I tell you that I preceded him as a sports commentator before, oh yes, from 75 to 81, I was a regular commentator on TV, and a regular participant on the sports programs in GBC, both radio and TV. And then when Mills started the Petroleum Commission for the upstream, he also made me the founding chairman. So there are several other things I've done. And of course, in education, I've served on several, and then I've served on various committees of the World Health Organization. It's a long story.
What do you make of how the virus is playing out on the continent and indeed Ghana?
Well, as for the virus, it's here to stay with us. We just have to obey the protocols. So far, Africa has been, lucky enough not to face the devastation that we are seeing in Europe and America, and especially in Brazil. There may be various factors accounting for this. Nobody seems to know. Gradually, evidence is beginning to emerge, including this possibility of even vitamin D being a potential immune boosting factor. And of course, we in Africa, with the sun shining all the time, our skin is always manufacturing more than enough vitamin D. Who knows? Maybe it's a factor. That's why we have so many asymptomatic people running around. But that doesn't mean we should be complacent, because some people have got it and have developed symptoms, and some have died. Only that it's not as devastating as it has been in other countries.
As a chemistry professor and also being into medicinal chemist, I do know that you spent some time at the University of Nairobi between 1985 thereabout to about 1990, supervising the thesis of some of these PhD students. And one of it was on the plant that Madagascar is claiming to have actually used as a herbal base or medicine to explore the cure of COVID-19. That's the Addae Mensah afra. I know you have done some work on this. Just a brief on this one, and whether indeed we should take it serious at all.
My feeling is that, I have worked on that plant before. I've supervised 2 PhDs of people who worked on the plant and other plants. And so I know a lot about it. It shouldn't be dismissed just like that, because there are certain constituents of that plant which scientifically have the potential of helping to manage some of the symptoms, like the congested air passages, like the sudden effects on the cardiovascular system, like some of the fevers that come in, some of the coughs that come in, and even the so-called comorbidity conditions. Some of them are treated with this plant. So we should not just dismiss it offhand. The important thing is for those who are in charge of our health system to make sure that all the necessary tests that need to be done are done. Even with well-known drugs, they are constantly being subjected to various tests all the time to make sure that their efficacy is maintained, the consistency is maintained, the active ingredients are maintained all the time.
What do you make of the challenges that COVID has brought to us in the educational sector and how we're going about, easing the first phase of the restrictions and how we are responding to these challenges?
We have to find ways out of it, and I think the process has started already. Certainly methods of teaching are likely to change. Class sizes will need to be minimized, and that will mean having more teachers in the classroom, more facilities in the classrooms. Government should be prepared to put in the necessary financial and other resources to make sure that these facilities are provided for the educational institutions. When it comes to the rural areas, we will really have serious challenges, and especially with children in the basic schools. You can separate them in the classroom. You can have distancing, social distances or physical distancing, as I would rather prefer to call it, in the classrooms. But what do you do when they go out during recreation? How can you prevent them from interacting with each other, from chasing each other on the football field, from touching each other? You can't go and stand there shouting all the time, don't shake hands, don't touch somebody, don't do this. It's not going to be an easy solution, but I'm sure we can deal with it if we really are serious with it. Yeah.
From what you said, what do you want to see to convince you that indeed we're doing this in safety?
First of all, let's make sure that whatever facilities are required to make sure that the children are safe are provided. Let's make sure that that happens. Talk is easy. Action is difficult. If you say, let's take for example the universities. When I heard what the president said, I wondered what was going on. If you say that university classes should be halved, if you take my MPhil final year students, for example, there are only 10. And those 10 can be taken at one go. You go to political science department, one class can be at as many as 1,500.
1,500?
Yes, or even 2,000. If you say half of them, you haven't done anything. If you say 100 at a time, it will mean having one lecture given 15 times or 20 times. It's physically and economically and mentally impossible. It will mean tripling, quadrupling your teaching staff. Where are you going to get them from? So it's not an easy solution. It's going to take a lot of thinking and a lot of planning. I'm sure the universities, if they are given the free hand to think these through, will be able to overcome the difficulties. Of course, they have to be given the necessary logistics to do so.
You were part of the foundation members in the consultation process for the free SHS policy. Prior to the 2012 general elections, President Akufo-Addo consulted you on this policy. What were your opinions then about the policy, that's free SHS?
I made it very clear that things are not like what they were 50 or 60 years ago, when most children could not afford the fee for school. Now we have quite a lot of people who can afford to pay fees at the senior high level.
So clearly you agree that in principle the policy is good, but in terms of scope, implementation, and the all-important question of sustainability, have you got answers over the 3.5-year period that this policy has been implemented?
We don't know how it is faring there, how difficult it is for government, especially now that COVID-2 has come to take a lot of the revenue. We don't know what's going to happen. Ideally, I don't think that it is too late to revisit the issue. But it has now become a political thing. And we are in an election year. If the president says that we are going to revisit the issue, the opposition parties or the minority parties are going to take it up. He has failed. He said he was bringing us free researchers. Now he has seen that the whole thing has failed. It will be a political disaster. On the other hand, if he doesn't go back to it, we may have a price to pay in future, economically. And now, these children who are now being produced en masse will soon be going to the universities. Where are they going to be put? We haven't even started planning that aspect of it and how much it's going to cost.
So do you see this happening, that we get to a point where we're not able to sustain this policy?
Oh, yes. Yes. I haven't changed my mind on that. Already the signs are there. And I talk to people, especially some of the teachers and the head teachers, and they have problems. They have problems. Even with disbursement of funds, the monies don't go early. And now, these children who are now being produced en masse will soon be going to the universities. Where are they going to be put? We haven't even started planning that aspect of it and how much it's going to cost. And university or tertiary education is not cheap.
Had it not been for COVID-19, the first batch of the free SHS students should have been preparing to go to the university in September.
Exactly. But nothing much has been added to any infrastructure in any of the universities. A few universities had some structures under construction, dating back even to the previous government. They are still not complete. The geology building in Legon, which is a Ghana Education Trust Fund project, is still under construction. Several other projects all over the country are still under construction. And now we are going to turn our attention to constructing health facilities. It's not going to be easy. And I don't envy the government.
Do you see government listening to divergent views now about, for example, that some of the things that you raised or the concerns that you raised about the policy prior to its implementation?
Oh, well, I can't speak for government. It's up to them to listen or not to listen. The problem in this country is that when people speak normally, people make up their minds before they start any issues. So when you start asking questions or raising issues, their minds are made up. And they think that it's a sign of defeat if they listen to you and try and, or even accept to go back on the original idea. A typical example is what is happening with the new university bill that is being discussed. I cannot speak for government. Those of us who make our views known without fear or favor, we will continue making it. But many of us are getting more and more frustrated, especially those of us who are nearing the twilight of our lives. I've been in this thing since I was 9 years old. You will be surprised. And I'm still in it. If you know my life history, you will know that I've been in national affairs or national service since I was just 9 years old. I may get to a point when I will say I'm tired. Let others take it up.
Well, you made reference to the Public Universities Bill, which is in Parliament now, and the almost over 38 CSOs, institutions that have raised concerns about the various aspects of this particular bill. How does this bill threaten the autonomy of public universities?
In many ways, I wouldn't like this program to focus on that, because I will need a whole program. Other bodies are taking care of it. The Academy of Arts and Science has presented its memo. They were in Parliament yesterday. UTAG, also CDD, all, I understand there are about 38 or 40 different memoranda before Parliament. So they will deal with it. But first of all, it is unconstitutional. Yes. So some aspects of it are unconstitutional. The ministry is claiming that there is a national tertiary education policy out of which the bill emerged. But some of us know a few things about that national policy education and how it emanated. And it belies what the minister is saying. And that policy document itself has a lot of problems with it. Some aspects of it are unconstitutional.
The foundation policy?
Yes, out of which they claim. But I happen to know, and anybody can challenge me, that whilst that policy document was still in preparation, a draft bill was already circulating in various circles. I know that. And anybody who thinks that I'm not telling the truth can come and challenge me. You know. So you ask how it affects autonomy. The 1992 Constitution had a certain aspect which wanted the universities to be autonomous and independent, both in the spirit and the letter. If you take Article 68(1), it seeks to say that no president of the country, while in office, can hold any office in any university, not just the public universities, any university in the country, which means that the spirit of it, the framers of the Constitution, did not want any president to have anything to do with any university as far as holding office is concerned. Because before that 1992 Constitution, the head of state was the Chancellor. And then Article 195, which outlines the way certain officers of the state are appointed. 1953 specifically takes out the higher education institutions and research institutions and says that appointment of officers of these institutions should be by the governing councils. So now, if you have a bill which seeks to have the president appoint the chancellor of the university and the chairman of the university council, who are both principal officers of the university, then you are definitely going against both the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. Clause 47 of the bill, which also says that the minister will have the power to issue directives to the universities and the universities shall comply. Which means I can be sitting there as Vice-Chancellor, I get an order from the minister, sack Professor so and so, because he has gone and criticized so and so, and I have to comply. And people in the past have fought against this. You know, people always refer to the Nkrumah time when he was Chancellor and his so-called interference with university affairs. But if you look at all the correspondence, if you look at O'Brien's book, if you look at Kwapon's book, and correspondence that I had the privilege of seeing when I was Vice-Chancellor, you will see that any time Nkrumah dealt with the university, he wrote his letters in his capacity as Chancellor. He signed it as Chancellor, never as head of state. So he was always legally right. As Chancellor, he had the right to do what he was doing. So you can have a problem morally with the things, some of the things he did. But now, if you give the Chancellor's position and the President is controlling the Chancellor by proxy, I mean, you know what is going to happen. Well, definitely, being an educational institution, naturally, at one time or the other, you will be interacting with your sector ministry. And that is why the National Council for Tertiary Education was created as a buffer between the universities and the government. And in fact, the bill that set up the National Council for Tertiary Education originally, and I've served on that council on 2 occasions, 2 separate occasions, so I know what goes on there. The bill that set it up makes it an independent body. Over time, it has become virtually like a wing of the Ministry of Education. In fact, that bill made it such that the Minister of Education could not give orders to the National Council of Tertiary Education. Anything they did, they had to discuss it with the universities, because they acted as the, what do you call it, regulatory authority for tertiary education.
Some vice-chancellors, pro-vice-chancellors, and other main stakeholders in the tertiary education sector have made the point that there's a real intent about this bill, which government it's not putting out there. You also align with that line of thinking?
Well, government is trying to say that they don't intend to conclude the university. But this government may say so. What if another government comes into power? Let me give you an example. Even though it was during a military regime, others have given other examples of how orders have come from the top. During the days of Achampon, the government just got up and said sabbatical leave for all universities has been abolished. The minister or the commissioner of education at that time was one Colonel Nkegbe. Without any discussion with the universities and without knowing even the purpose of sabbatical leave. Now, at that time, Professor Kwapong was out of the country as Vice-Chancellor. The Pro-Vice-Chancellor too was, the Pro-Vice-Chancellor was there. But the Pro-Vice-Chancellor named Professor Layani happened to be head of Agric Economics, Dean of Agric, Pro-Vice-Chancellor. And with the Vice-Chancellor away, he became the acting Vice-Chancellor. So he just minuted the letter from Nkegbe, Vice-Chancellor, to see. And then he applied as Professor Lanyani to Professor Lanyani, the head of department, that he was going on sabbatical leave. And then approved it to Professor Lanyani, the dean, that he was going on sabbatical leave. And approved it as dean to the acting vice-chancellor, who was one and the same person. And by the time Professor Kwapong came, he was gone. As far as he was concerned, he hadn't done anything wrong, because he had minuted the letter for the Vice-Chancellor to see. But if there had been a law that the Vice-Chancellor has to comply with all directives, when Kwapong came, he would have said that sabbatical leave indeed is abolished. But he took it up and fought it. He fought it, and sabbatical leave was restored. Achampong himself came out and said it was done without his knowledge. Of course, we may all know that that was probably not the case. But we really stand a real danger of some of these things happening.
Well, but then again, autonomy, doesn't, I'm sure you don't mean the fact that autonomy doesn't necessarily mean that these public universities should go unchecked. There must be some level of, and some form of accountability at all levels. So if that's the case, then how should that be done if what the bill says is not what is required?
Oh, but there has always been accountability. The university is subject to audit by the Auditor General, and it is done every year. And we have internal auditors, we have external auditors. Their reports go to the Auditor General. We appear before the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. How many times? In any case, if even there have been any malfeasances, the laws of the country are there to deal with this. Do you need ministerial fiats and ministerial orders? But maybe we should leave this. I'm not currently actively in university affairs. So let's leave these arguments to those who are currently handling it, who are there. I've only expressed some of my personal fears and my personal views, but the bill has a lot of problems with it. If we are not careful, it is going to create obstacles for higher tertiary education.
But is it a case that government can intervene but not interfere? And in what form can the intervention come and not necessarily cross over into the realms of interference?
Well, definitely, being an educational institution, naturally, at one time or the other, you will be interacting with your sector ministry. And that is why the National Council for Tertiary Education was created as a buffer between the universities and the government. And in fact, the bill that set up the National Council for Tertiary Education originally, and I've served on that council on two occasions, two separate occasions, so I know what goes on there. The bill that set it up makes it an independent body. Over time, it has become virtually like a wing of the Ministry of Education. In fact, that bill made it such that the Minister of Education could not give orders to the National Council of Tertiary Education. Anything they did, they had to discuss it with the universities, because they acted as the, what do you call it, regulatory authority for tertiary education.
So tell me, how is retirement life like, or has it been for you after you retired? Do you get any rest at all with your memoir and other things that you're doing?
I've been extremely busy. As I told you, it was after my retirement that I became chairman of Petroleum Authority as well as Petroleum Commission. I have served on various committees of the National Council for Tertiary Education since I retired. I've done so many other things, and I've been writing. And of course, I did post-retirement contract until I was 70 years old. Now I'm an emeritus professor, which means I work for free. And I still supervise students. I still give some lectures, seminars, especially for PhD students from all over West Africa. We have some seminars which are supported by Carnegie Corporation on scientific communication and scientific writing. And we do this twice a year. People from all over West Africa. This year, for example, in January, when we ran it, we had somebody coming all the way from Kenya to participate. I give lectures during that period also. And then I also, as I said, I supervise some PhD and postgraduate students. And I mentor the young faculty. Yeah. For example, twice a year also, we go on a retreat with the young lecturers who have done some research and want to publish their papers. And we go and assist them for a week, so that by the time we leave that workshop, the paper will be ready for publication. So I'm doing a lot. Of course, the strength is going down, but I'm still active. Sometimes people ask me why. When do you rest? When do you sleep? But I find time to rest.
Emeritus Professor Ivan Addae Mensah, I want to thank you so much for making a time, sit with us, talk to us, let us into your life and into your home, and then also make suggestions for the good, for the greater good of this nation. Thank you so much, and I wish you well.
It's a pleasure.